Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show. My name is Avrum Rosensweig, and I'm delighted to have you here. I remind you, for those who have heard the show and those who have not watched it, that the essence of this show is really to give humankind a pat on the back. And I do this through inspirational interviews. And just to go a little bit deeper, the idea is that I believe that we live in a magnificent place. We share this earth of ours. And the things that we have accomplished in 6,000 years, 2 billion years, whatever your spiritual religious predilection is ideologically, it's incredible to see how this world has evolved. And that is because of us. Now, I know that there's a cloud hanging over us today. In my Jewish community, there's a lot of worry, there's a lot of fear. And there's a lot of concern about safety for our Israeli brothers and sisters and for Jews all over the world. But the truth of the matter is we have to look past that. And we have to see the glimmer and the light and the illumination that we project as humankind. And leadership is often a reflection of the greatness within our community. It's not easy to be a leader. If you've done it, then you know that there are days where you just are so convinced, I cannot do this again. This is too hard. Membership is just not coming along. And your sense is, I have to walk away from this. I have to leave it. But you see that great leaders stay in the game and they try and they work arduously to make this world a better place. So in sync with all of that, I am deeply honored and very, very happy and delighted to have as my guest today, Ambassador to the United Nations from Canada, Mr. Bob Rae. How are you, sir?
I'm well, Avrum. Thank you. Very, very well. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you too. I have to tell you that, I've done my research, I've done your reading on you. And while I think it's safe to say that most Canadians, maybe of a particular age, are familiar with your work, it was just an honor, really, to read up on you and to see where you came from, to read about your mom and dad and your family and all the things that you've gone through in life in order to arrive at this stage where I believe you're about 75 now. Is that correct?
Yeah, 76.
76. So muzzle tough on that. Congratulations. Are you a young 76? How old do you feel?
I don't feel 76. I feel good. I mean, if I, like everybody else, if I lost 10 pounds or more and did a little bit more exercise, I'm sure I'd feel even better. But I'm feeling fine. I've had health challenges in my life, but I've been able to overcome them, and I'm doing just great. Thank you.
So you talk about your health and losing a few pounds, and I'm in that boat as well. I can imagine to lose about 30. How is the food at the United Nations cafeteria?
It's got too much bread and starch in it. I think I don't eat much in the UN cafeteria. I don't, but there's a place called the Vienna Cafe, which is, I would say, ambitiously named, which has reasonably good coffee. So I do drink their coffee, but otherwise not too much of the food.
Have you always been a coffee guy?
Yeah, from about the age of 15, I guess, 14 or 15, I started drinking coffee. And, yeah, I like it.
So I guess as part of your role as the ambassador is to push Tim Hortons. Would that be accurate?
I have actually had a very, very exciting cup of Tim Hortons in Kabul. And in Kandahar, the Canadian mission, the Canadian military mission, wherever it went, always had a Tim Hortons availability, which was terrific.
I heard about that.
Yeah, I recommend it.
How do you take your coffee?
A little bit of milk, no sugar.
So you're not triple then, eh?
No,
Yeah.
no.
Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Keith Rae is the Canadian ambassador to the United Nations, as was his father. Mr. Rae was the 21st Premier of Ontario from 1990 to 1995. Later on, he became a member of the Liberal Party and was then eventually became their leader. Bob Rae studied at the University of Toronto and later attended Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar, where he earned a degree in law. From 2008 to 2013, Mr. Rae was elected as a member of Parliament from Toronto Central. In 2017, he was Canada's special envoy to Myanmar, focusing on human rights issues and the Rohingya crisis. He's an author, he's an academic, and he's been an advocate for Indigenous rights. He's also the husband to Arlene, who I thank for helping to get this interview. And he's got 3 beautiful girls. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bob Rae. How is it for you when you hear me read your bio or anybody else? Do you say, yeah, that's me, I've done a good job, or I can't believe that's who I am?
No, I mean, I think it. I would just say it sounds a lot easier than it was. I mean, the reality is, a lot of the. I've just been really lucky to serve. I've just had an incredible, good chance of serving and helping to make a difference in a number of ways, and I'm very grateful for that. I think I've been given many chances to do what at the time I wanted to do, and I've enjoyed doing what I've done. There are always setbacks on the way, but I also feel I've got more to do. I mean, I don't feel, that I'm at the top of the pinnacle. I don't feel that I'm, a man blessed with huge, political power or anything. I just feel like I've been given a chance to serve. And to me, I think it's part something I learned at home and growing up. Public service is a vocation, and my parents had it, and luckily I've had it too. And I feel blessed, particularly because I have this vocation. I say that I use that word very, very because it's a calling. It's something like, this what you can do. It's what you want to do, and it's been wonderful to feel that there's a broader purpose to what I'm trying to do. And people could say, well, you just made it up, or it's not really there, or and various critics will say you didn't do a very good job in different places, and you say fine. But the fact is, I've had an extraordinary chance to make a difference. It's been wonderful.
So at this point in your life, would you say you're happy? Are you satisfied?
I would say that I'm happy, but I would say that I'm not satisfied in the sense that I think to say you're satisfied gives everyone an impression of complacency. I don't feel the least bit complacent. I feel that there's still more to do, and I also know that I've made mistakes, and I know that I'm far from perfect, and I don't have any sense of complacency about my life. I still have an urge to try to do more, and like everyone, I think to feel that the mistakes that I've made, there's some things you always feel you've got to come to terms with. You've got to recognize that the reason we have in the Anglican Church we have confession. Many Christian denominations have confession where we confess our sins. I'm a believer in that, and I think it's important to be willing to admit your mistakes. But I am compared to where I have been at different times in my life, when I was definitely not happy and not well. I feel well and I feel happy.
You talk about the Anglican Church. I know that around 1968 you discovered your Jewishness, and you were committed to only dating Jewish women at the time.
Well, that's actually a complete fiction. I don't know where that came from. You may have got it from Wikipedia, but that's just not true.
It's not.
It might
It's
seem
not.
like a good story, but it's not the case.
Aye. So when did you discover indeed that there was Jewishness in your bloodline?
Well, just to be clear, how do I know? I discovered that my father's father was Jewish at birth, and that he had changed his name during his marriage to my grandmother, and I found that out when my father told me, and I was glad that he told me. I didn't know it, but it also put some things. Some things then began to make sense about my dad, particularly about the kind of person that he was, and his friendships and his commitments. And yeah, it did affect me. But the story about only dating Jewish girls is it's somebody just made that up. I don't know who, but I don't know how it worked. I think it worked its way into one of the books that was written about me by, and probably whoever wrote that book used this person as their source. But no, that's a that's a silly exaggeration, frankly.
Is there a lot of mythology about yourself that follows you around?
Oh, a bit. Yeah, I mean that's sort of one of the things that happens in life, whether we're public people or private people. Rumor and gossip and lots of stuff like that um, is part of life, unfortunately. And with social media, it's exaggerated a gazillion times. So um, I think it was Mark Twain said that a lie can go around the world 5 times before you got up for breakfast.
Yeah, exactly.
And these things travel, and now we've got these lying machines called cell phones that are very dangerous in how they communicate information, because there's so much misinformation and disinformation. So yeah, I'm sure there's more of that out there than I even am aware of. I mean, I know there is, because I try to limit my engagement with social media to a point where it doesn't overwhelm my life.
So would you send out tweets?
I do. I'm at Bob Rae 48. Um, like like everybody else, I think, or not everybody else, but some people, I'm troubled by what's happening to Twitter. I don't like how the platform has become so polarized, and I also don't like the fact that the person who owns the platform controls it, and I don't like what he does with it. But for me, it's one way of communicating with people and with amplifying what it is the Canadian government is doing, what I'm doing in New York, what my public job is. Um, but if anybody said, "Are you thrilled with being on Twitter?" I'd say no. It's not. It can't possibly be a thrill. You'd be a very strange person to find it thrilling.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think when you take a look at the average time that the average person is spending on social media, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I see it with my son, who's 18 years old, and his friends. To some extent, they forgot how to communicate with one another, you know?
Oh, totally. It's been devastating for communication and for conversation. Um, I think I've often given talks about this where I make the most important thing we can do in a lot of situations is just learn how to listen,
Mm-hmm.
to take in what somebody else is saying, to listen to what they, and not only to listen verbally, but by hearing, but also watching their body language, observing, paying attention, being considerate. Uh, this is how you become a good friend to somebody. This is how you understand why somebody is unhappy, or somebody's unhappy with you, or somebody's not engaging in a positive way. And there's very little opportunity on social media to listen, and there's very little opportunity to converse and to share a perspective with humility, admitting that you could be wrong. You don't go around on Twitter saying, I could be wrong about this, but I think this. Once you've said it, you kind of said it. So the idea that it's a place of dialogue is nonsense. It's not a sense of dialogue. It's a place where monologues are passed along, and then other monologues come your way, and that's not a conversation. And we need conversation in the world. We need an ability to converse with one another, and that doesn't exist right now.
Would Arlene say you're a good listener?
Well, you should probably ask her, but I think the answer is I hope she would say you're a better listener than you were. Let's put it that way, because we've talked a lot about listening and about this problem of people not listening and not hearing. And I think when you talk to someone who's very close to you, like your spouse, you say a lot of the times you say, "You're not hearing me," or "I'm hearing you. I'm listening."
Yeah.
And I think it's a really important part of human communication. We always think that. I was talking to a legal group the other day called the Advocate Society, and I said we also need a listener society. You have a lot of advocates, but we don't have a lot of people get around and say, my job is to learn how to listen.
How would that work? How would a listener society work, though?
Well, somebody would have to start the conversation, I guess.
And then stop.
Yeah.
That'd be quite fascinating. I was really enchanted by, I think that's the right word, by your incredible love of your family. In your book, and everybody should read it, From Protest to Power, Bob Rae, Personal Reflections on Life and Politics. I also think that it's personal reflections on your growing up years, your mom, your dad, your grandparents, whom you spoke so beautifully about, and some of your buddies, which I want to get to in a few minutes. But first, I want to talk about Saul, your dad. He, when I think about fatherhood, Mr. Ambassador, I think about an individual who takes his child by the hand, metaphorically or otherwise, and talks to them. And as you say, listens to them. Takes them on a journey through life and introduces them to beautiful things and wonderful people and adventures and experiences. Your father, who was also the ambassador to the United Nations, am I correct? He seems to have done that with you. He took you on a journey.
Absolutely. And he didn't do it in a kind of a didactic way or a heavy-handed way. He didn't say, I'm showing you what I do or what, how to do things so you will do them as well. It wasn't like that. I mean, when we were kids, cottage life was very important to us. It still is.
Yes.
We're blessed with having a cottage and being able to spend time there. And for him, it was a huge break. He was a hard worker, and he had a huge amount of energy. But when he'd come to be with us as a family, we'd go fishing. He taught me how to fish. He taught me, how to put a hook on a line, how to cast the rod, how to make it work, what to do. He loved fishing. He loved to do it himself, but he also loved doing it with us. And in particular, he did it with me. And it was very meaningful. And when he died for a while, I didn't go fishing, and my kids would say, Dad, can we go fishing? And I'd said, it's hard for me right now, and I got over it. And now I see it as part of what I do in memory and in honor of him. He taught me how to play tennis. He taught me how to play golf, and not very well in tennis, better than than in golf. But and he taught me a lot about his work. He brought his work home, and my mother was very engaged in my dad's work. She was very interested and very knowledgeable. She was from England and went to Cambridge University, and when they got married, it was just before the war broke out, and Second World War, and they really, that generation of people, I mean, they lived through incredible experiences. I mean, my dad Mom and Dad lived in Ottawa at first when they lived in Princeton, New Jersey at first when they got married, but after a few months they moved back. My dad moved back to Canada because of the war, and he joined the Foreign Affairs Department, and he was sent overseas. His first job overseas was during the war. He was sent, so they went by boat to Algeria with General Vanier, who was the Canadian ambassador to the Free French, and that would have been in the early 40s, and my mother was pregnant at the time, and she had the baby. My sister Jennifer was born when my father was there, and then father went to France when France was liberated. He was one of the first diplomats to be in Paris after the liberation, and my mother came over, and then my brother was born, and you sort of think of it, and you say, okay, so this is somebody who took, went on boat convoys during the war in order to join her husband, and it took me forever to sort of put this all together. I'm thinking about her life. I'm saying, Mom, how did you get from here to there? And they said, of course, well, we went by boat. That's what
Yeah.
And it wasn't like any other. It wasn't a cruiser. It wasn't a cruise ship. It was, these are tough circumstances. But frankly, she thought nothing of it. And so my dad was the same. He just said, take things as they come and do them as they come. So, yeah, he did teach me a lot, and he taught me a lot about diplomacy. I mean, I watched him in meetings. People would come over to the house to have dinner, listen to the dinner time conversation, and he was a very entertaining guy. He had a wonderful sense of humor, and he was a very gifted musician, too. And those are all things that he brought into my life. I think a lot of my own sense of humor and my own energy level and my love of music. I think a lot of those things I got from my dad.
Yeah, I believe you said your father was a better pianist than you were, right? Than you are.
He's a better natural pianist. I mean, I'm not bad. I mean, I'm not knocking myself down, but he couldn't read music. He learned how to play the piano by basically using guitar chords as the basis for how he was taught how to play, and ukulele chords is how he's taught how to play. So he knew basic chord structure, but he was a very good stride player. He was a more jazzy player than I am, but he was very good, and he played a lot of good stuff, and he was very, very gifted.
What was the love between your parents visible to you? Would they hold hands? Would they kiss in front of you?
Yes, all the time.
And did that carry over to you and in your life?
I think so. Yes, I mean, we certainly hold hands and kiss each other, and it doesn't matter who's there. So yeah, we certainly do that.
So you're able to tell your daughters, as an example, "I love you." You can say that
all the time, every day, every time I see them, and many times during the day. Don't hold back on that. That makes no sense.
So when you're standing on the pulpit at the United Nations, speaking to your colleagues, of which you've done extensively over the last few years, I often wonder about what you're feeling when you stand up there. Can you feel a great sense of love for humankind when you're giving over your message?
That's a good question. I mean, I do. I think we all of us have a sense of our love for. Well, I don't all of us do, but I certainly do. A sense of our love for people and our love for human beings. But many times the messages you have to deliver are tough messages about why certain things shouldn't happen or can't happen. I mean, in the invasion of Ukraine, for example, I was very direct, and I made a point of, at that time, because the seats move around in the UN, at the time I was speaking, the representatives from Russia were right in front of me, and I was staring right at them when I was saying what I was saying. And the difference between debating or talking in the UN and elsewhere is that there are very few times when anybody says it or anybody shouts anything out at you, you get heckled. That doesn't happen. In the House of Commons or in the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, you can't say two words without somebody interrupting and shouting back.
Yeah.
So speaking at the UN is relatively easy because it's you do it on with a degree. There's a level of civility that is enforced. I hope that never breaks down, but it's there now. And usually the way in which people express their lack of love for the speaker is not to listen to them, not to be in the chamber when they're speaking. And that happens quite a lot.
So when you spoke about Russia vetoing humanitarian response to the situation in Syria, of which they did 15, 16, 17 times, would you be able to engage with Russia's ambassador afterward, or would they walk away from you in a huff?
I don't think they walk away in a huff. I think people don't usually take speeches personally. We're all there representing our government. And we do have a job to do that requires us to listen to others if they come up and say, well, this is why we're doing this or this is why we're doing that. I think it's fair to say that we, in the case of Russia, we know what their positions are, we know why they take them, and we know that they will give, if you like, they will give as good as they get in terms of how they speak and engage. And you kind of have to live with that, right? As something that happens.
When you say live with that, what do you mean?
Well, you've got to learn how to take it as well, because they'll say some things about you that are not particularly complimentary, not about me personally, usually, but about the Canadian government or why our positions are inconsistent. We criticize this, we don't criticize that. We have views about this, but we don't have views about that. There's lots of charges that are leveled on all sides. If you just listen or watch a speech at the UN, which anyone can see if you want to live stream UN debates, you'll get a feeling for where other countries are coming from.
When another country, another ambassador, when you were in politics, another politician would call you out on ostensive hypocrisies, would you say you're right? Would you say, yeah, I really need to work that through, and where we are being inconsistent?
Well, I might not say it at the moment, but I certainly sometimes it makes me think about saying, well, is there a way in which our positions are inconsistent, or my own situation is? I mean, I think that one of the key signs of humility, and I do think humility is an exceptionally important quality, is to go through your life recognizing that there are circumstances in which you could be wrong, and that frequently you say things with a level of certainty that you might not even feel, but you feel you have to say it in order to get through the argument. But I think there's a lot of people who could use a dose of saying to themselves, we could be wrong about this, but this is what we think. I don't hear those words used very often in the UN.
But do you yourself, though, do you show humility when it's called upon?
Try to. I mean, I have in circumstances, I've apologized personally to people. I've said things that were over the top. I've said, more particularly in my political debates in Canada, I've said things that I now recognize were actually incorrect. And whenever that happens, I always make a point of correcting myself and apologizing.
Just in sync, in light of what I'm asking you here, I know that within the Jewish community today, or aspects of that community, of which I am a member, there is a strong Canadian government, and the message that you're giving at the United Nations has changed in terms of its support for Israel. Have you found yourself having to explain yourself more so to the Jewish community, and perhaps sometimes say, look, I realize the inconsistency, working it through. How is your relationship in terms of that played out?
Well, I think to the extent that the Canadian positions have been perceived to have changed, I'm not sure that Canada's positions have changed. I think what's changed has been some of the positions of the government of Israel, and my views about Israel have not changed. But there are circumstances, because events happen. Events go one way and events go another way. And if somebody says, "Well, you didn't support Israel on this," you say, "No, I didn't, because we don't think it's right. We don't think it makes sense. We don't think it's not in Israel's interest, and it's not in the world's interest." And so those positions, those votes, if you like, sometimes in the UN will change because we feel it's important for us to express a clear view. I think the best way to express it is this: is that when, for a long time, the government of Israel did not reject outright the idea of two states, of Israel and Palestine living side by side. In more recent years and months, the Israeli cabinet and the Israeli government have rejected the idea of two states, and have done so in some cases extremely emphatically. And I believe very strongly that this is not helpful to any kind of longer term peace process. And that is what I think has led Canada to conclude that there are some things we need to do and say about settlements, for example, about statements that are made about going back into Gaza and occupying Gaza again. There are issues around the delivery of humanitarian aid, where Israel's insistence that everything is fine is contradicted by all the other information we're getting from the World Food Program, from the International Red Cross, and a number of other organizations. So yes, we are taking positions that don't sound like we support Israel, whatever they do, whenever they do it. We will never do anything to be critical of the government of Israel. And I don't think that's ever been Canada's position. Canada has always taken positions that are different from Israel's position on certain issues. But I think there is a very broad base of support in Canada and in my government, in the Liberal government, for doing everything we can to indicate publicly our support for the existence of the state of Israel and Israel's right to live in security. We were very critical, as you know, of the horrendous events that took place on October the 7th. But I think sometimes people are looking for a level of adherence to the position of the government of Israel from a Canadian government that is frankly not realistic. The current government in Israel is going to take positions that we might not agree with, and they may take positions that we do agree with, and that it's difficult to have those conversations only in private, because the UN is a place where you kind of have to show what your cards are whenever the votes come up.
Just as an individual who understands what danger is, I mean, you've been involved in politics for so many years, and now as the ambassador to the United Nations, you see danger around the world. You know, you speak about Israel's message currently about not pursuing a two-state solution. I tend to think that's political at this point. They're positioning themselves to get into a stronger place in the future where they can negotiate, because personally, I think it's inevitable that there will be two states. But the question really is, Mr. Ambassador, isn't it, in your mind, so incredibly dangerous in that region? October 7th is only one example. The 150 or 200,000 missiles that Hezbollah has stored, which are currently being destroyed by Israel. My God, the damage that can cause on Israel, the tunnels that were burrowed from Gaza into Israel, really be the time to talk about a two-state solution? I think there's an existential question here more so.
I understand that. I understand the threats to Israel. Absolutely. I think they're very clear. I don't think there's any doubt about it, and there's never been any doubt about Israel's right to defend itself. Canada has been among those countries in the world that have been the clearest in saying, and that's frankly why Canada is subjected to so much criticism from the other side. We get on a daily basis, I get barraged by criticism from the other side because of not saying some of the things that they would like us to say, that we think are themselves exaggerated and themselves not really accurate and certainly not helpful in the current context. But I think the key, to be very candid with you, the thing that struck me most about this last year, has been essentially that we're dealing with two populations that are feeling deeply threatened and traumatized: the Israeli population and the Palestinian population. And I think we have an empathy gap where it's very, very difficult for the people representing the Palestinian people, the Palestinian Authority, to express any empathy for what Israel went through on October 7th and what is currently being experienced. And quite frankly, it's very difficult to mention the level of suffering that the Palestinian people are feeling. In all the statistics and numbers that you just gave, you didn't mention the one that I hear most often in New York, and that is that over 40,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza, and upwards of 80,000 Palestinians have been injured and will probably be in some way disabled or affected by their injury for the rest of their life. So that is something that needs to be built into the psyche of everyone, to understand there is tremendous suffering and insecurity and trauma on all sides of this discussion. Everyone has a legitimate case to make that they have suffered. And to deny the legitimacy of someone else's suffering, or to even deny that it's happening, I think is a terrible mistake. I hear that in the debates a lot. And I think, you say, you think a two-state is inevitable. I don't think a lot of people are hearing that from anybody in the leadership of the state of Israel at the moment, and that is troubling. Not because it's going to happen overnight, or not because you think you can snap your fingers and make it happen, but because unless you provide a vision of hope and a potential outcome that people know will be successful, we're not going to get anywhere in the Middle East. It's going to continue to be deeply traumatized countries battling it out and thinking that one more act of reprisal will solve the problem. For all of the efforts that we make to achieve military answers to the problem, the reality is that the solutions will only come when we put the guns aside on all sides, and when there are serious political conversations about how to go forward. And that we're not in that phase at the moment. That isn't happening. We know that. But eventually we have to get there.
So would you say there's any legitimacy whatsoever in the phrase or the idea that if Israel were to lay down its arms, there would be mass genocide? If Hamas and Hezbollah were to put down their arms, there would be peace?
I don't think that's I don't find that a particular helpful way to say it. We know, not because I don't believe that the security situation is serious. We know perfectly well that Hamas's objective and Hezbollah's objective is to destroy Israel. Mm-hmm. We also know that the objective of the Israeli government is not to destroy the Palestinian people, but to try to rid the region of the kind of terrorism that has produced the conflict that is happening. What I'm saying is, at some point, you need to figure out what is the political compromise that will give a stronger basis for security. No one's suggesting that Israel, quote, lay down its arms, or that Israel, give up its ability to defend itself. Nobody would do that.
Yes.
But certainly I would never do that. I don't think anybody expects that to happen. But there does have to be some way of projecting out what is the political objective of this war, and what do people see as a short-term, medium-term, long-term solution to the level of conflict that we've been seeing.
I'd like to go to a lighter place in history and in our world. And I want to pick up on what I was saying at the top of our interview here about friends that you grew up with. And I'm a big advocate of buddies. If you were to say, at what age were you kind of stultified, where you stopped in your tracks in terms of, wow, I just love that age? It was when I was a teenager with my buddies. So I read about your friends, and I want to ask you about a couple of them. We'll see how much you remember about your past and what you wrote down in your book. There's a buddy that you had by the name of Billy Paulson, and the two of you invented a baseball game called Step Baseball, right? You tell us about that? Tell us about that game.
Well, I mean, first of all, you should know I saw Billy Paulson in Washington last week.
Did you?
I was in Washington last week to go to some World Bank meetings, and Billy and I are still in touch on Facebook and emails and so on. And I said, I'm coming down, said, let's have dinner. So we had dinner on the Potomac River in the beautiful spot in Washington. And we actually talked about step baseball. I said, have you ever seen anybody else play this game? He said, no, maybe we invented it. I said, I have no idea if we invented it or not.
How did it work? How did the game work?
Well, basically, you've got steps, and you've got a tennis ball, and you throw the ball against the steps. And if you imagine it for a moment, if you hit the corner of a step with a particularly good throw, you can get a home run. It's all about playing the angle, but from which the tennis ball comes out of the steps. And so one guy's pitching, the other guy's in the field, and you're up, and you're playing the game, and you're pretending to be one side and another side, and then you either get out or you get on, whatever. And if the ball went a certain distance, it would be a hit of one kind or another. If you caught the ball in the area, the ball was out. There was obviously no opportunity. So it's only two people playing. It's not a big crowd playing.
There's two, yeah.
We used to play a lot of games. We were just chatting about this. So yeah, I mean, Billy, I've been lucky to have had friends from childhood, both growing up in Ottawa and in Washington, and at the lake at our cottage, that the ones that are still alive are still my friends, and the ones that are not alive are people that I think about a lot. And I value friendship a lot. It means a ton to me.
So do you have different types of friends? And what I mean by that is my buddy Bert Sarfati, he goes to a Sephardic synagogue down the street, and he has friends there that he doesn't see during the week, right? Or he's not really in touch with them. But on Shabbat, on the Saturday, or on the holidays, they have this incredible connection that go years back. So you talked about your cottage friends, your growing up friends in Ontario, and then in Washington. Do they know each other at all?
Well, no, you see, because I spent my childhood in several different places. I lived, first of all, I lived in Ottawa until about grade 3. And Ottawa was obviously my home. My parents had a house there. Then we moved to the States for 6 years until I was about 14. And then when I was 14 to 18, I went to Geneva, where my dad was ambassador to the UN there, and I went to an international school. And then I came back to U of T in Toronto. And then from Toronto, I went to Oxford. And then I came back to Canada and done different things. So do a lot of my friends not know each other? No, many of my friends don't even know the other. They don't know who they are. So it's I do have some friends that are a collectivity of people I guess over the late years, we've maintained our friendships in Toronto and in Ottawa in a way that allows people to get to know each other. We have gatherings where we just have a gathering of friends and people that we've known, and it's fun. But friendship is a very special thing, and I find I've been lucky to have been able to keep a lot of my friends and to maintain those friendships has been very important.
You said that Al Kamen first made you aware of drugs.
Well, yeah, I think Al Kamen made a lot of people aware of drugs.
That's his legacy, is it?
Oh no, I think he probably had other legacies. I don't want to diminish him in any way. I'm not sure he's still with us. Al was not I wouldn't say Al was a close friend, but he was certainly somebody that I knew well in university. Yeah.
How did he make you aware of drugs?
Only because he was very interested in them and very interested in. He was a hippie. He was he was in our university residence, and he was very much of a practicer of that lifestyle and that way of doing things. Yeah, there were a few other people around him, like a few other people like that in university in those days. It was the 60s. I was not in that crowd, I would say.
Did you ever smoke marijuana?
Yes, but not for long and not much. Didn't really enjoy it, and
You didn't
get
enjoy
into it at all.
Yeah, there seems to be folks who try it and they really get into it and they love it, and then there's others who said, no, it did nothing for me, right?
No, I'm in the second group. I just didn't do it, and I have asthma as well, so I didn't smoke cigarettes so very much, but I didn't. No, I didn't I wasn't part of the drug scene.
Do you carry a puffer around with you?
I do.
Always?
Yes, I have it. I don't carry it in my pocket, but I take one kind of puffer twice a day, and I take another one if I have any incidents. But I've pretty much reduced that. But I still have it when I travel. I have a puffer, all my puffers with me.
But just to be totally transparent, by the way, I tried marijuana and I quite liked it. So
Well, good for you.
It's
Well, there are people of our generation, I think, who've rediscovered it, and we're not in that group.
I always wish that I would love beer. I wished I would, because it makes sense in our Canadian culture, but I do not like beer at all. Not at all. Do you like beer?
I drink beer. I don't drink to excess. I mean, I drink beer. I drink wine, but I'm not try to keep it under control. I mean, in my job, you've got to be pretty careful about.
I imagine
making sure you're not letting it get a hold of you.
Now, one of the things that you've been very forthright about, very honest about, and I commend you for it, is mental health. And I say this because I think that there is such a huge problem, not only in our country, but throughout the world, in terms of dealing with mental health. I would even go so far as to say that in the United States, many people feel they have a gun problem, and I think that's accurate. But I think that the bigger problem is the mental health issue, and I think that politicians and leaders and people of all backgrounds have to come out with it and talk about it. Now, I want to read just a few lines here from an interview that you did with Global Affairs Canada's Deputy Minister of International Trade, John Hannaford, in which you said, I was always very interested in people's emotions and talking about the mental health in my own family history. My father's sister had a series of episodes which were not talked about a lot, but certainly were part of our family life. I think the thing that really made me wake up was in my own experience. I mean, I was going along well at Oxford University. You were a Rhodes Scholar. I had just finished my degree. I was starting to work on a doctorate. I'd been going back and forth between Canada and the UK. And then your mental health started to be challenged. Do you want to pick up on that narrative?
Yeah, it was exactly right. I mean, I felt a sudden sense of, I woke up one morning, um, having just got off a plane from Canada to the UK, and was staying in my apartment in London with some friends, and I just felt an incredible sense of anxiety. I don't know how else to describe it. Um, that was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before, and uh, luckily, I was staying with friends who were very supportive, and we kind of talked about it and worked it through, and then they said, you really got to go and see somebody, because I was not only anxious, I was also very depressed. And I went to see somebody who was a therapist, and he was extremely helpful in getting me to come to grips with some of the things that were bothering me that didn't feel I could talk about easily, and he began to extract more sort of doubt and uncertainty out of me, and we went through the worst, and I got through until we got to better and best. And all this time I decided to stop working on my PhD, and started working as a community worker in North London. I worked in a housing and legal aid center in North London, and went to therapy, and that was kind of my life. And then eventually I came back to Toronto to go to law school, and realized that I was somebody who was in recovery, and that I was somebody who had experienced this, and because it's a very much of where your kind of mind and body are not in the same place. People say it's like being sad. Why were you sad? You said, no, it's not about sadness. These incidents are not about sadness. They're about incapacity, about not being able to function and move in some cases physically, but mainly just move like in a conversational way. And I had one brief, I wouldn't say relapse, but I had one brief episode when my brother died, and my wife at that point said, you've got to go see somebody right away, because you don't want to go down that rabbit hole again. And I said, you're right. So I did. I went to see somebody, and he was very, very helpful. Yeah, it happens. And I now spend a lot of time in my professional life, like work, talking about it, and also talking about the things we need to do to make sure that we understand each other better. It is a huge problem. I mean, in every city, in New York, in Toronto, in London, wherever you go, there are a lot of people who are experiencing it, and you can see it on the street. You can see it in people's behavior. We don't lock people up. We don't send people to asylums. We haven't done that for a long, long time. But we do. People are wandering the streets, and they're not getting treatment, and they're not getting care. And in our own lives, I think we know there are times and moments when things are not going well. And we don't do a good job of talking about this, because it's a very real issue. So I do make a point of talking about it. I will talk to my staff about it. I will ask them, how are they doing? I will say, is this okay? Are you sleeping well? And they'll say, Ambassador, why are you asking me these questions? I said, because I've been there, and I know that doesn't always happen. And I want you to feel that wherever you're working, you can talk to all of us about how you're doing. And during COVID, it was difficult, because a lot of people did experience some challenges because of the isolation and because of the difficulties of not seeing people. Yeah, I do talk about mental health. It's very important. It's a very important part of being healthy as a human being, and it's also very important to understand that it's a silent killer. It's a silent thing. People, I can't tell you the number of times I've talked to people who've lost loved ones to suicide, and they say, if only I'd known, if only he told me, or if only she'd said something. And what can you say? I mean, you can only say, yeah. I mean, it's a terrible thing, and it is linked to addictions. And that's why, we can joke about booze and drugs, but, the fact is that when you get addicted to something, it can be very serious, and it takes on a life of its own, because it is a physical thing that's now taking hold of you. And that's really hard to change. So dealing with all these issues is exceptionally important for our society. And we really still, despite all our openness, we actually don't talk about it very much.
Do you think the world is mentally healthy?
No.
I don't think so either.
No, I mean, we don't. I mean, the world, as a collectivity, no. I mean, I think a lot of things that are happening in the world are crazy. I mean, I do think that some of the things, I use the term post-traumatic stress, which is a psychological, psychiatric term, and I do think that we need to understand that a lot of people are driven to very impulsive behavior because, frankly, they're not that healthy, and many of their people are not that healthy, and people. When a mass group gets driven by mass hysteria, which is a real thing, you've got a real problem. And we're seeing that in politics all over the world today.
Mr. Ambassador, when I was reading about that, excuse me, that part of your life having to do with mental illness, and one could argue that there's no such thing as a part of your life when we discuss that, because you had a therapist who told you, listen, you're never really entirely in recovery. You're going to carry this for the rest of your life. But that really resonated with me, in particular, when depression came back to visit you and you were in a position of major leadership. Now, I have also carried with me throughout my life at different times depression. I was actually in a hospice or something like that when I was about 22 years old because of depression and what they would have called then as a breakdown. I'm not sure what that is, but to me it was major depression and anxiety. And I remember when I worked for the United Jewish Appeal, which is where you and I met, that I would have to go to meetings, or I would have to stand in front of a few hundred people and speak. And then later on, when I started Via Hafta, which is a Jewish humanitarian organization, I remember distinctly we had a gala event. Mia Farrow was there, and I was feeling deep depression that day. And I had to stand in front of 600 people and deliver a message. I wasn't quite sure how I would do it. Xanax helped. I carried that in my pocket, and that was a big help. But I'm just curious, as a leader, as a huge leader, how would you deal with that, knowing, you know what, man, I'm not here right now. I'm not feeling so great. Yet you had to address, the masses or groups of people. How was that for you?
Well, I think, to be clear, I think when I saw the signs of it coming back, I think it was very situational, because, as they say in the field, because it was very much related to my late brother's death. I didn't. I was not incapacitated. I was just feeling very low, and I knew I needed a kick up. I've had the benefit of not having taken medication. I say benefit because when I was experiencing my first episode, it was in the early 70s, and I suppose I could have. I was never offered medication, and I don't think any less of people who do. In fact, I think in some cases it's very important. And it's also, I mean, I'm not an expert at all, and I talk about it, but you also understand, as soon as somebody comes to you and says this or something, don't pretend you're the doctor. You got to get people into a place where they can get the care that they need. It's more that I think what's happened to me is that when I see the signs of some kinds of getting down or allowing myself to get down, which I really don't allow to happen. I mean, I make every effort to not get seized by it. I make a point of really trying to do simple things. Don't drink at all. Get more rest. Do more exercise. Get out and do other things.
Yeah.
And a little bit of self therapy, if you like, and also always have one or two people that you can talk to about
Yeah.
how you're feeling. And in my case, I have that in which has made all the difference in the world to me, because it means that, you know, I can have those conversations. But I mean, I think we need to understand that wherever we go in life, and you know, Plato said this. I think my father also. I know my father said it to me, but I think it was Plato who probably said it first. Is, you know, you got to remember in life that everybody you meet is having a struggle.
Yes.
Everybody you meet, everybody you know is having a struggle. So the more you are able to kind of connect with that person at a certain level and say, how are you doing? How's it going? What's up? And sometimes it's just a hi, how are you? But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a way of sending an opening to somebody to say, I'm happy to talk about, you know, whatever you want to talk about.
You know, you have a lovely spirit. You really do. You're very, very generous of spirit.
Well, thank you.
You are. And I appreciate that so much, as you being a leader. We need leadership like you. Just a few questions before we wrap here. Who's your favorite writer?
George Orwell.
Why?
Because he's the most insightful person about the world around us. Without any question, the best political writer of the 20th century, but he's got so much to tell us in the 21st century. So, yeah, that's an easy answer, an easy one, not even close.
What's your greatest regret?
I think my greatest regret is losing touch with some people and not following through enough on stuff that I should have done. And the good thing about my life is, at some point I'll have more time, I hope, to be able to sort of figure out, yeah, some things. Music, a little bit, I feel I haven't followed through enough on music. And my greatest regret is losing touch with people. I think people that I don't see enough, or haven't reached out to enough, and I feel that loss. But again, that's something I think I can remedy when, you know, time becomes more of a friend to me than it is at the moment.
I've been fiddling around a little bit with AI, artificial intelligence, and for the last number of interviews that I've done, I've asked AI to print up a poem about my guests. So the following is an AI poem about Bob Rae. You ready?
Great. Yeah.
In the halls of power, he took his stand. Bob Rae, a voice both bold and grand. With a heart for the people, he charted the course, navigating the tides with unwits. From the north to the south, his vision was clear. In times of struggle, he lent an ear. A champion for justice, he fought for the right, with words like a beacon shining so bright. Through challenges faced, his spirit held strong. In a world of chaos, he sang the reform song. With wisdom and courage, he paved the way, a legacy built in the light of day. So here's to the leader who never lost sight of the hopes and his dreams that ignite the night. In the heart of this land, his name will remain, Bob Rae, a vision through sunshine and rain. What do you think?
Amazing. I mean, not that it's amazingly perceptive, but it's amazingly sort of kind.
Well, you deserve it. You deserve
it. Thank you. And it even rhymes. That's amazing.
Yeah, it does rhyme. It's iambic pentameter. Look, I think the thing that I would ask my listeners and viewers to take away from this interview is that over the years, you have always stood for helping humankind. That has been your primary message. And you have done it on the world stage through Canadian politics, and now you're doing it as Canada's ambassador to the United Nations. I think people look at you, Mr. Rae, as a fine human being, one who's generous of spirit. I really do. And I'm hoping that people who watch this interview will pick up on some of the tools that you used in order to get to the place that you're at today. to be a good father, to be a good husband, to be a good leader, to stand in front of a Russian ambassador or whomever else and to say what's on your mind and what you believe, and to do it with fortitude and to do it with knowledge that, hey, listen, I could be wrong. And if I am, I will apologize. Like, those are fine qualities. So, not meaning to sound obsequious, commend you for life. Nice job on living to date. And as we say in Jewish, you should live till 120.
Well, I'm looking forward to living to 120. My grandmother lived to be 107. So,
Oh, did she?
yeah. So it's not impossible. But thank you for those good wishes.
Oh, you're welcome, my friend. And in our second interview, which we haven't had scheduled, we'll talk about your grandmothers because you had a great love for them. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching and for listening. Please take out of this interview what you can towards the betterment of humankind, towards the betterment of our planet, and towards the betterment of yourself as an individual. I'm extraordinarily grateful for having this opportunity to speak to Ambassador Rae, and I wish you and your family well all the days of your life. And until we meet again, they say in Yiddish, sei gesund. Do you know what that means, Mr. Rae?
I don't know what it means exactly because I only say sei gesund.
It means go in good health.
Go in good health.
Yes. Thank you so much.
As in Gesundheit.
Well, it's same family. All right. Thank you.